Hello, David. Thanks very much for joining us on BlueNotes in what I've got to say is a much nicer setting than we normally have for these interviews. We're in Wagga. Why are you and the board in Wagga?
I think there's a danger of boards sitting in one particular place and not really hearing what's going on. So for years, the ANZ board has always put aside time to travel somewhere. For example, when we were looking at what to do in Asia, we went to Asia. When we were looking at things like where's the IT movement going, we went to Silicon Valley. And we decided with droughts, with people doing wonderful things in agriculture, with regional areas developing, that we should come to Wagga, a wonderful regional area, and basically see for ourselves. Learn from the people who are here and actually take back ideas and memories so that it can educate us around the board table.
And it has unquestionably been a very difficult year for banks and for the financial system. There's been a Royal Commission. One of the underlying messages that's come through perhaps is that banks haven't listened to the community. Is this something that you're trying to do more of, whether it's here in Wagga or elsewhere? How do you listen more to the community, to these concerns?
We should be listening to our customers. We should also, by the way, listen to our staff, because often they're both customers, listening themselves to customers and providing services to the most important people, our customers. So I think listening is good, and we're here in Wagga to hear more, to see what's happening firsthand.
And as far as the practicalities of how the board operates and how you as chair operate with the board, in the light of what's been happening, does that need to change? Does the nature of governance at board level have to change?
I think firstly that governance does change over time anyway. And I think also that we've been changing or evolving for some years now. The concept that we are very keen to do, and which has been very well espoused by our CEO Shane Elliott, is that we want to be a simpler bank. This idea of being simpler, trying to make sure that we can understand all the parts of what we're doing, was not something that arose on the steps of the Royal Commission. This is something he started when he came in, and which we as the board massively are behind. So I think so too is the case with governance. We are evolving as we go. One of the things, being out here and listening, is something that we feel is important, and that's, as I said, has been going on for some time, but we're now putting a big effort behind it.
And if we think about that, the simplification, to take that example, if you look at the annual review, which has just come out, or the results, you're starting to see some of the impacts of that simplification program. If we think about it from the governance side, perhaps, the underlying message seems to be from the community quite fairly, banks should be fair and responsible. So does that come out of simplification, or is that something else for a bank to be fair and responsible?
Well, I'd start by saying I think all of the board and all of our management believe we should be fair and responsible. Often, when you have a complex structure, and indeed you've got, if I may use the retail term, many SKUs of goods that you're selling, it's hard to be fair and responsible in every avenue of a complex business. Certainly simplification will help, but I think also it's incumbent on all of us, and we are doing that, to basically try and take steps to make sure that we ask the question, should we do it? And indeed act responsibly.
It would be fair to say, though, that again, we're sort of talking about trust here, and how do banks become trustworthy again as they were in the past. Does the community expect something more dramatic than an evolution in how you're thinking?
Well, I think firstly, if you want to know what the community feels, one should ask the community. I don't think that I'm the ideal person to ask that. My feeling is that the community feel that banks as an industry have let them down, and it's quite sobering when you see the whole list of things, even though that most of them were public, that have come up before the Royal Commission. They were very public before, but seeing them all together is very sobering. And I believe we, as a consequence, have to try and rebuild trust and I believe with excellent staff, an openness, a simplification, and indeed a feeling that we're going to be fair and responsible, I think we can do that.
And when we think about it in terms of board composition, does it require different kinds of directors? Boards and chairmen such as yourself often talk about having the correct skill sets on the boards. Do we have the right skill sets for these new challenges?
Well, that's a very good question. Firstly, I believe that the concept of diversity round the board table is absolutely necessary for this. The concept, for example, that only men can determine what the community should get, etc., in my opinion is absurd. The concept that we should only have people from a particular place is also absurd, and I'm very proud that our board presently does have a mixture of geographies round the table. I think backgrounds from all parts of business and indeed allied fields are very valuable. You might ask me, should we extend it even further? And I'm not sure about that, because boards have obligations and have to understand what a business, and a very complex business, even though we're simplifying it, actually stands for and operates. But within those confines, a diverse set of people arguing and enjoying basically the opinions of others, not just designating what theirs is, and listening, I think makes for a very good board.
And if we can shift then slightly to the shareholders' perspective, you know, shareholders are obviously investing in the bank for a sustainable return over time. What should they be thinking about? Can you give a steer to shareholders around dividend policy, you know, capital management in the year ahead, those areas that are the board's prerogative?
Well, the first thing I would say to shareholders is I believe this board has actually demonstrated the importance they place on making sure that they examine all the time what is the right amount of capital, and when we feel we have too much capital, either by buyback or other means, making sure that we bring that capital back to where we think it should be. I can assure shareholders that we as a board talk about capital all the time. We've got to make sure that we're strong, we've got to make sure that we're producing the right returns to our shareholders, and those issues are looked at regularly and often.
Well, thanks very much for spending some time here before the event. Hopefully the experience is very useful, and I'm sure the board will do some listening out here.
We will be listening, undoubtedly. Thank you.
Thanks, David.